Henry, a single father, scrubs the opulent floors of Drake Global Capital, his heart a raw drum counting down to his son Leo's life-saving surgery. He possesses nothing but calloused hands and a mountain of debt. Then, one chilling night, Alexandra, the powerful, isolated CEO, finds him weeping on a gilded stairwell. Her offer is a desperate lifeline for Leo, but demands an unimaginable price. Henry must give her a child every night, after the sun dipped beneath the jagged skyline of Seattle. Henry Walker became a ghost in the gleaming halls of Drake Global Capital. He was 35, a single father. His broad shoulders often slumped with the weight of exhaustion. But his movements were precise, methodical. His uniform, a serviceable gray jumpsuit, hid muscles earned through years of physical labor, not gym memberships. He cleaned, he polished, he erased the day's footprints from marble and glass, an invisible presence in a world built on visible power, his true purpose. However, lay far beyond these 61 floors of finance. It resided in a small antiseptic hospital room with a 7-year-old boy named Leo. Leo, with his warm brown eyes and a laugh that brought sunshine to Henry's weary soul, suffered from a congenital heart condition. The doctors called it critical. The surgery, they said, couldn't wait much longer. The cost a staggering $200,000. Henry's life hadn't always been this bleak. 3 years prior, he'd had a small house in suburban Seattle, a steady job as a mechanic, and a wife he adored, Amanda. But Amanda had left, not out of malice, but from a crushing inability to face the mountain of medical debt that had begun to accrue for Leo. She packed her bags one Tuesday morning, leaving only a note, and disappeared from their lives, taking with her Henry's illusions of a stable future. He, however, had stayed. For Leo, he always stayed. He sold their house, paid off a fraction of the debt, and moved into a cramped apartment. The janitorial job at Drake Global Capital paid slightly more than other options and offered a night shift, allowing him to be with Leo during the day. So, every evening, as the skyscraper emptied and its silence deepened, Henry meticulously wiped down every surface, from the lowest floor to the executive suites. He knew every corner, every hallway, every locked door in the building, and every night. A single light remained on, burning steadfastly on the 61st floor, the penthouse office of Alexandra Drake. Alexandra Drake wasn't just the CEO of Drake Global Capital. She was its owner, its heiress, the most powerful woman in the Pacific Northwest. Rumors swirled around her like the currents of Puget Sound. She could buy an entire town without blinking. She once fired an executive for a single dissenting word in a board meeting, and she had never, not once, been seen smiling by an employee. The other janitors whispered her name in hushed tones during their breaks. Security guards avoided her gaze. For Henry, a man whose world consisted of bus routes and hospital visits, Alexandra Drake belonged to a different galaxy entirely. Then came the night in October that changed everything. Henry was halfway through cleaning the grand staircase on the 60th floor when his phone buzzed. It was the hospital. The nurse's voice, calm but urgent, sent a cold shiver down his spine. "Mr. Walker," she said, "Leo's condition is worsening. Dr. George says the surgery can't wait any longer. We need your answer within a week." 1 week. $200,000. Henry crumpled onto the marble steps, the phone still clutched in his trembling hand. Tears streamed down his face, blurring the gilded railings, the polished walls. He buried his face in his hands, muffling the raw, guttural sobs that tore from his chest. He had no idea how long he sat there, lost in a swirling vortex of despair. "What are you doing here?" A voice, cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, cut through the vast silence. Henry jolted, Looking up, Alexandra Drake stood at the top of the staircase, her silhouette framed by the faint moonlight filtering through the immense windows. She was a vision of severe perfection in a tailored black suit, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, her deep brown eyes seeming to bore straight through him. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Henry stammered, scrambling to his feet, hastily wiping his tears with the back of a hand. "I'll get back to work immediately." But Alexandra didn't move. She simply stood there, observing him, her gaze traveling from his red-rimmed eyes to his trembling hands, to the phone still clutched tightly. "You work the night shift, correct?" she asked, her voice devoid of inflection. "Yes, ma'am, Henry Walker. I've been here 8 months. Alexandra remained silent for a long moment, then spoke, her voice not loud, but carrying an unmistakable authority that silenced the vast stairwell. "Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, my office." Before Henry could even formulate a question, she turned and walked away, the click of her heels echoing into the distance. Henry watched her disappear, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. That night, sleep was a cruel stranger. Henry lay on his worn sofa, staring at the ceiling, every fiber of his being consumed by a gnawing dread. What had he done wrong? Was she going to fire him for daring to show weakness? Losing this job meant losing everything. His mother, Bernice, 68 and in the early stages of Parkinson's, was sleeping soundly in the next room. Oblivious. Leo was in the hospital, counting down the days to a surgery Henry couldn't afford. If he lost this job, they would all lose their last shred of hope. At precisely 7 o'clock the next morning, Henry stood before the glass doors of the 61st floor. He had never seen this part of the building during the day, bathed in the soft morning sunlight of Seattle. The city stretched out below, a miniature world of concrete and glass. Alexandra's secretary, a young woman in a crisp white blouse, ushered him in. The office was vast, larger than Henry's entire apartment. Marble floors reflected the light. A massive black oak desk dominated the center, and a full wall of glass offered a panoramic view of the city. Alexandra sat behind her desk, a remote, formidable figure. She did not invite him to sit. Her expression was unreadable, her dark eyes like polished stones. Then, she pushed a brown leather briefcase across the desk. "Open it." Henry's hands trembled as he unclasped the briefcase. Inside, a thick folder lay nestled. He flipped to the first page, and his breath hitched. It was Leo's medical file, the diagnosis, the treatment plan, the surgery cost, every detail, every test result, every doctor's note. "Where did you get this?" Henry choked out, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Alexandra did not answer. She stood, walked to the vast window, her back to him, her silhouette outlined by the morning light. "I can help your son, Henry. I can pay for the entire surgery, erase all your debts, give you and your child a new home, a new life." Henry stood frozen, the words too monumental, too impossible to fully comprehend. He felt as if his soul had momentarily detached from his body. Then, Alexandra turned, her brown eyes sharp and focused. "But in return," she said, each word falling like metal hitting marble, "you must give me something, something money can't buy." The air in the vast office suddenly felt thick, heavy, suffocating. Henry struggled to breathe. "What is it, ma'am?" he managed to whisper. Alexandra walked closer, close enough for him to catch the faint scent of her expensive perfume, close enough to see the faint, tired lines around her eyes, and in a voice that held no tremor, she said, "I want you to give me a child." Henry stood like a statue, certain he had misheard. "Ma'am, I don't understand." Alexandra returned to her desk, her movements precise, her posture that of someone intimately familiar with control. "You heard me perfectly well. Henry, I don't like repeating myself." "But why?" Henry asked, desperate to grasp the incomprehensible. "You could have anyone. You could—" Alexandra cut him off with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Hire a surrogate. Find a man from the upper class. Do you think I haven't tried?" She opened a drawer, pulling out another file, thicker than Leo's. 15 years, Henry. 15 years I've been searching for a man I could trust. And do you know what I found?" She tossed the file onto the desk. Papers spilled out covert photos, prenuptial contracts, private investigation reports. "The first," she began, her voice flat. "A lawyer in Portland secretly signed a deal with a rival firm right before proposing to me. The second, a doctor, supposedly respectable, turned out to be dating 3 other women at the same time. The third." Alexandra paused, and for the first time, Henry saw something other than cold resolve in her eyes. It was pain. "The third was Corbin Webb, son of a prestigious family, handsome, charming, said exactly what I wanted to hear. I nearly married him." She stood and walked back to the window, looking down at the city slowly waking beneath the morning sun. "One day before the wedding, I found a prenup agreement he had hidden in his briefcase. He'd hired his own lawyer to draft it, with clauses that, had I signed, would have given him control of 30% of my assets the moment we married." Henry remained silent. He had no words. "That was when I understood." Alexandra continued, her voice barely a whisper. "No one wants me. They only want what I have, my name, my wealth, my power. No one sees Alexandra. They only see the Drake name." She turned, her gaze direct, piercing. "But you're different." "Me?" Henry couldn't hide his shock. "I'm just the janitor, ma'am." "Exactly." Alexandra nodded. "You're the only person in this building who wants nothing from me. You don't flatter. You don't try to get close. You even avoid looking at me whenever I pass by." "I just thought that was polite," Henry murmured. "That's honesty." Alexandra corrected. 8 months. Henry, I've watched you for 8 months. You work hard. You never complain, you don't steal, not even a pen. And every night at exactly 11 o'clock. She continued, her tone softening slightly. You video call your son, no matter how exhausted you are. Henry felt stripped bare. She knew everything about him. I also know about Amanda, Alexandra said, her voice gentler still. I know when she left, with whom, and where she is now. I know you have never said one bad word about her in front of Leo, no matter what she did. Leo doesn't need to know, Henry murmured. He's lost enough already. Alexandra looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, as if he had just passed an invisible test. That's why I chose you. You're not perfect, but you're decent. And in my world, decency is rarer than diamonds. She sat down and looked directly at Henry. I'm 39, Henry. My biological clock is counting down. The board of directors, those old men who worked with my father before I was even born, are waiting for me to fail. They want me to be without an heir so they can tear apart the company my father spent his life building. So, you need a child to prove the Drake legacy will continue, Henry stated, understanding dawning. Alexandra nodded. And I need a father I can trust. Someone who isn't greedy. Someone without political ambitions. Someone who will disappear once it's all over. Living his own life with enough money to never look back. Henry felt as if he were standing at a cliff's edge, gazing into a terrifying abyss. On one side were all the values he'd been raised with honor. Integrity. Dignity. On the other side was his son, Leo, lying in a hospital bed, counting down the days to his last chance. What if I refuse? Henry asked, his voice barely a whisper. Alexandra tilted her head slightly, her gaze unwavering. Then you may walk away. No one will ever know about this conversation. You'll continue working as usual. And She paused. I'll find another way. And Leo, that is not my concern. Alexandra's voice turned icy again. I am offering a business deal. Henry, not charity. Henry lowered his head, staring at his worn work boots, then at Alexandra's expensive heels. Two worlds, brutally opposite. I need time to think, he said. Alexandra stood and returned behind her desk. You have 24 hours, she said, without looking at him. After that, this door closes forever. That night, sleep remained elusive. Henry sat beside Leo's hospital bed, listening to every labored breath his son took, the heart monitor beeping steadily like a grim countdown. Leo's small hand was wrapped around Henry's finger, even in sleep. Dr. George had said Leo might not make it another 6 months without surgery. 6 months. 180 days. Henry had tried everything. Bank loans denied. No collateral. Amanda wouldn't answer his calls. A crowdfunding page had raised a few thousand before fading into obscurity among countless other desperate stories. He had even considered the illegal, dangerous black market for organ sales. Henry looked down at his calloused hands that had cleaned thousands of square feet of flooring, repaired hundreds of old cars, held Leo since he was a fragile newborn. Could these hands, these ordinary, hard-working hands, actually save his son? Then he thought of Alexandra, a woman who had everything, yet had nothing. A woman betrayed so deeply she no longer believed in love. A woman who was the most powerful figure in Seattle, yet also the loneliest. Alexandra wanted a child. Not love, not marriage, just a child. And he could give her that. Henry got up and walked to the hospital window. The city lights spilled across the night sky like a million fallen stars. His own father had lived a life of unbending principles, integrity, honesty, no compromise, and had died in poverty. Henry didn't want Leo crying at his father's grave the way he had cried at his own father's. He pulled out his phone, looking at the business card Alexandra's secretary had given him, bearing the personal number of the most powerful woman in Seattle. His hands trembled violently. His heart pounded like a war drum. He pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before Alexandra's voice, cold and distant, answered. Have you made your decision? Henry took a deep, shuddering breath, looking at Leo sleeping, his angelic face dim under the weak yellow light. Yes, he said, his voice raw. I agree. Silence hung on the line for a few seconds. Then Alexandra replied, without the slightest change in her tone. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. I will send someone to pick you up. The call ended. Henry stood there, phone still in hand, staring into the Seattle night. He had crossed a boundary, one he could never return from. At precisely 8 o'clock the next morning, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up in front of Henry's apartment building. He had been up since 6, showered, and put on the neatest clothes he owned, a white shirt that had begun to fade, and an old pair of dress pants. Before leaving, he leaned down to kiss Leo's forehead as he slept in the hospital bed, told his mother, Bernice. He had to go out for something important, then walked out into the cold Seattle morning. The car glided through the familiar streets of Seattle, then turned into Medina, where mansions hid behind tall fences and heavy iron gates. Henry had never set foot in this exclusive enclave. He only knew it was where the wealthiest people in Washington lived. Alexandra Drake's mansion appeared like a modern castle, Pacific Northwest style, with dark timber, soaring glass walls, and massive windows facing Puget Sound in the distance. The lawn was trimmed to perfection. A housekeeper named Margaret let him in. The polished floors reflected the light from a massive modern chandelier. The air inside was cold and still. No laughter, no chatter. None of the sounds of a normal home. Alexandra was sitting in the living room by a stone fireplace. She wore a light gray dress, her dark hair falling loosely over her shoulders. "Today," she began, her voice businesslike, "Dr. George, my personal physician, will perform a health check on you. Blood tests, a full examination. I need to be sure you are completely healthy before we proceed." Henry nodded. "I understand. After that," she continued, "my lawyer, Astrid, will have you sign a non-disclosure agreement. If you break any of its terms, you will face very serious legal consequences." Dr. George arrived in the afternoon, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, calm and professional. They drew Henry's blood, took his blood pressure, asked about his family medical history, his diet, his personal life. Henry answered everything after the medical team left. Henry sat alone in the vast living room. That was when he noticed not a single family photograph. No wedding pictures, no childhood photos, only art and expensive decorative pieces. Beautiful, perfect, but utterly soulless. "Your test results are excellent," Alexandra said later, appearing in the living room. "We can begin next week. In the meantime, you'll stay here." "But my son," Henry started. "Leo, my personal physician, Dr. George, will oversee his transfer to the best hospital in Seattle tomorrow." Alexandra cut in, her voice firm. "All expenses will be covered by me. Your mother, Bernice, will also be given comfortable accommodation near the hospital." A week passed, like a strange, surreal dream. Henry lived in Alexandra's mansion, treated like an honored guest. Every meal was prepared by her private chef. New clothes were brought to his room every day. He video called Leo. "Daddy, it's fun here," Leo chirped through the screen, his brown eyes shining. "The nurse gives me ice cream every day." "Be good, sweetheart. Daddy will visit you soon." "Where are you? Daddy, why don't you come home?" Henry froze. "Daddy's working far away, baby. A very important job." Leo nodded, trusting him completely, and that trust, that innocent faith, tore Henry apart. On the 7th night, Alexandra called him into her study. "The final test results are in. Everything is in order. We can begin." "Begin when?" Henry asked, his throat tight. "Tonight." Silence dropped into the room. Alexandra walked to the window, her back to him. "Are you afraid?" "Yes," Henry admitted. "Afraid of what?" "Of many things. Afraid I don't know if this is right or wrong, afraid that I don't understand you." Alexandra laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no joy. "You're the first person to say that to me. Everyone fears me, but no one dares say it out loud." She sat in the chair beside him, facing him directly. "You want to know what I truly want? I'm not even sure anymore. I thought you always knew what you wanted. Running a corporation is easy. There are rules, numbers, strategies, but life doesn't have a manual." She took a sip of wine. "Do you know when I started running the company when I was 24? My father had a stroke. The board wanted to sell everything, and I had to stand up against those wolves." "And you won," Henry stated. "I won. But it took me 15 years. 15 years without rest, without friends, without love, only work." She looked directly at Henry. "Do you know the worst part? By the time I finally had room to live my life, I realized I had forgotten how. This house has 12 bedrooms. I use one. I can buy anything in this world, but I cannot buy a single evening of dinner with a family." Her voice tightened, a hint of vulnerability. My mother died when I was 10. Breast cancer. She lay in her hospital bed, holding my hand, and said, "Alexandra, don't be like me. Don't let life pass before you've lived it." I promised her, and I still broke that promise. Her brown eyes glimmered, betraying unshed tears. That's why I want a child. Not just for legacy, but because I want someone to love. Someone who can't leave me because of money. Do you think I'm insane? Henry slowly shook his head. No, I think you're lonely. Lonely enough to do anything just to not be lonely anymore. Perhaps you're the first person who has ever truly understood me. That night, they walked into Alexandra's bedroom, but there was nothing romantic about it. Only two lonely people standing across from each other in a heavy silence. "You don't have to love me," Alexandra said, her voice flat. "You only have to do what needs to be done." And that night, two lonely people came together, not out of love, but out of an agreement. As Alexandra lay in the dark, she whispered something so softly Henry thought he imagined it. "Thank you for not looking at me like an object." Henry didn't reply, but he heard every word, and for the first time, he felt something shift inside him, a flicker of compassion for a woman who had everything, yet had never once been truly loved. The following weeks passed with a strange, new rhythm. During the day, Henry visited Leo at the hospital. At night, he returned to Alexandra's mansion. Slowly, something subtle began to change between them. One evening, Henry went to the kitchen for water. He found Alexandra sitting alone, eating instant noodles. "The chef's gone home," she explained, "and I don't know how to cook anything else." Henry smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since he'd stepped into the mansion. "Would you like me to cook something you can cook?" she asked, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "I'm a single dad. Ma'am, if I couldn't cook, my son would starve." He made an omelet, simple and comforting. Alexandra watched him work with a newfound curiosity. "Where did you learn to cook?" "From my mother, Bernice. She said a real man knows how to take care of himself and the people he loves." He placed the plate in front of Alexandra. "Thank you." It was the first time she had genuinely thanked him, without the cover of darkness. From that night on, Alexandra no longer retreated immediately after dinner. Sometimes she stayed and talked about her work, about rivals, about decisions that could affect thousands of people. And Henry listened. He didn't understand finance or multi-million-dollar deals, but he understood loneliness. He understood what it meant to carry a world on your shoulders alone. A week later, Dr. George returned. Alexandra invited him into her study. The door closed. Half an hour later, Henry found Alexandra sitting by the window, tears streaming down her face. "Dr. George said, I'm pregnant." "That's good news, isn't it?" Henry asked, confused. Alexandra turned, her face streaked with tears. But what he saw in her eyes wasn't joy. It was profound fear. "I've been pregnant twice before. Both times." She trailed off. "The first time I was 26, with Corbin. I miscarried at 10 weeks. The second time I was 33. Ectopic pregnancy. I almost died," Dr. George said after that. "My chances were nearly zero. You are my last chance. Henry. And now the embryo has implanted in the right place. But with my history, the risk is very high. He says I have to rest completely. No stress. No overwork." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "If I stop, they'll tear the company apart." Henry knelt in front of her, his hand gently touching her arm. "You won't be alone. I know I'm just—" "Henry,
But I know how to take care of people. I know how to stay by someone's side when they need it." "You don't have to do that," Alexandra whispered, pulling her arm away. "This isn't part of the deal." "Some things matter more than a deal," Henry countered, his voice steady. "The baby you're carrying, that's my child too. I can't walk away the way Amanda did." Alexandra reached out and took his hand, her grip surprisingly tight. "Thank you for not looking at me like a contract."
From that day on, Henry became Alexandra's steadfast companion. He reminded her to take her vitamins, ensured she ate proper meals, and stood resolutely in front of her desk whenever she tried to work until midnight. At first, Alexandra resisted. "I don't need anyone to take care of me," she would snap. "And you've had 2 miscarriages." Henry would reply, his voice calm but firm. "Do you want a 3rd? Alexandra would glare, then fall silent, gradually. She began getting used to his presence, used to someone asking, "Have you eaten?" Used to someone who genuinely cared about her as a living human being. The walls she had spent years building around herself slowly began to crack. 2 months passed. Alexandra's pregnancy progressed steadily, every week. Dr. George nodded in satisfaction. "Everything's good, very good." Alexandra's belly had begun to curve slightly, a small, fragile curve, but it was the miracle she had waited for her entire life, and Leo had finally made it through the biggest surgery of his life. The news came on a Tuesday morning. Henry's legs gave out when he heard the words, "The surgery was successful." His knees hit the floor. The head surgeon placed a hand on his shoulder. "He's very strong. We did everything we could, and he responded with each passing day." Henry watched the color return to Leo's cheeks. His laughter, once fragile, now filled the hospital room. "Daddy, when can I go home?" Leo asked. "Soon. Daddy's prince. Very soon." For the first time in many years, Henry felt as if life was opening a new door, one that was warm and full of hope. One afternoon, Leo asked, "Dad, who's the person paying for my treatment? Grandma Bernice said someone kind helped our family. I want to say thank you to them." Henry froze. "It's a very special person, sweetheart. Someday I'll tell you everything." "Is that person kind, Dad?" Henry thought of Alexandra, the cold eyes hiding profound loneliness, the rare, shaky thank you in the dark. "That person is complicated, honey. But deep down, I think they're a good person. It's just that life has made them forget how to show it." "Like Mommy Amanda, Dad?" Leo asked, his innocent question piercing Henry's heart. "Mommy Amanda left because she was afraid. But this person stayed, even though they've lived their whole life in fear." Leo seemed to understand something beyond his years. "I hope they stop being scared someday, Daddy." Henry smiled, pulling his son close. "Me too, baby, me too." That night, Henry returned to the mansion. Alexandra was in her study, as always. "How was Leo?" she asked, looking up from her tablet. "Better every day. The doctors say he can come home in 2 weeks." Alexandra nodded. "Good. That's good." Henry walked closer. "What about you? Have you eaten?" "Not yet." He made dinner. When he brought it to her study, Alexandra looked at the plate, then at him. "You don't have to do this anymore. The agreement was for a child. I'm pregnant now. You fulfilled your part." Henry set the plate down. "Some things aren't about agreements, ma'am." Alexandra studied him. Why do you stay? Why do you care?" "Because you remind me of someone I couldn't save. And because my son asked me today if you were kind. I want to be able to tell him yes." Alexandra's eyes glistened. She looked away, turning her head slightly. "No one has ever stayed for me before, not without wanting something in return. I already have what I came for,
Henry said softly. My son is alive. Everything else is just me being human. Alexandra was silent for a long time. Then she picked up her fork and began to eat. And in that quiet moment, something shifted between them. Not love, not yet, but something close to trust, something close to hope. As Alexandra's pregnancy advanced, her need for rest became undeniable. Clinton, a long-serving board member with a silver tongue and colder eyes, began to amplify concerns about her disengagement. He subtly questioned her recent decisions, suggesting a lack of focus. Henry, still present in the mansion, noticed the increased frequency of urgent calls and veiled inquiries from Clinton to Alexandra's staff. He recalled the peculiar network activity he'd seen months ago at Drake Global Capital, and a familiar unease began to prickle. One evening, while performing a minor repair on Alexandra's home network, a perk of his new, unofficial role, Henry observed suspicious data traffic originating from a secure server linked to Clinton's department. It wasn't typical operational data. It hinted at a systematic erosion of a new client portfolio Alexandra was aggressively pursuing. He mentioned it to Alexandra, who, already weary, initially dismissed it as a technical glitch or an overzealous audit by Clinton. He's just trying to find flaws, she said, rubbing her temples. He always does. But Henry, with his janitor's eye for overlooked details and his mechanic's intuition for subtle malfunctions, couldn't let it go. He spent his nights, after ensuring Alexandra was asleep, meticulously sifting through accessible logs on the mansion's network, cross-referencing public news feeds about Drake Global Capital's market performance. He uncovered a pattern, a series of strategic leaks of minor, negative project data to obscure financial blogs, each timed to coincide with a small dip in stock prices related to Alexandra's key initiatives. It was not overt sabotage, but a calculated, slow poisoning. He presented his findings to Alexandra one morning, holding a printout of dates, IP addresses, and news snippets. Her eyes, usually so guarded, widened with dawning realization. He's trying to make me look incompetent, she whispered, her hand instinctively going to her subtly rounded stomach. He wants to depress the stock just before the annual shareholder meeting, forcing a vote of no confidence. Henry nodded, his face grim. He'll claim your pregnancy is a distraction, a sign of weakness. Alexandra clenched her jaw. He's been planning this for months. They immediately brought in Astrid, Alexandra's formidable M&A lawyer. Astrid, a woman of 40 with an intellect as sharp as her tailored suits, quickly grasped the cunning of Clinton's scheme. It's corporate espionage, bordering on fraud, she stated, reviewing Henry's meticulous notes. He's trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover by proxies once the stock is low, but proving it with merely these fragmented data points will be challenging. We need something more concrete to sway the board and the public. Alexandra, now seeing Henry not as a contracted father but as a crucial ally, tasked him with a deeper investigation. His janitorial knowledge of the building's internal systems, its hidden cameras, its rarely accessed server rooms, became invaluable. Henry, with a new sense of purpose, went back to Drake Global Capital, no longer scrubbing floors but tracing digital footprints. He located an old, rarely accessed backup server in a forgotten sub-basement, a system Clinton might have overlooked. Meanwhile, Alexandra contacted Vivian, an investigative journalist she had known from past, less scandalous corporate dealings. Vivian, a sharp woman in her mid-30s with a reputation for integrity, was initially wary of a tip from a powerful CEO. Alexandra, she said over the phone, this sounds like internal power struggles. My readers want real stories, real corruption. This is real, Vivian, Alexandra insisted. And it involves more than just stock prices. It involves trust, legacy, and a man's integrity. Vivian, intrigued, agreed to meet, demanding irrefutable proof.
Clinton, sensing Alexandra's growing defiance, escalated his tactics. Photos of Henry and Alexandra, candid and out of context, began to circulate among board members, implicitly questioning Alexandra's judgment and suggesting an inappropriate relationship. A rival, less reputable financial news outlet published a blind item, hinting at Alexandra's unstable personal life and a mysterious male presence in her private residence. Henry felt the sting of public humiliation, recognizing the familiar pattern of powerful men discrediting those who stood in their way. But this time, Alexandra, her hand protectively on her stomach, stood by him, her resolve hardening. He's trying to isolate us. It won't work. Henry's breakthrough came late one night in the sub-basement. He found it an uncorrupted, time-stamped log showing Clinton's executive access codes initiating data manipulation on the target client portfolios. Not just leaks, but actual, subtle changes to projections that would deliberately lower valuations. It was the smoking gun. He secured the data on an encrypted drive. The annual shareholder meeting was set. The atmosphere in the Drake Global Capital Auditorium was tense, thick with anticipation. Clinton, suave and confident in a tailored suit, began his presentation. He used carefully curated slides to paint a grim picture of recent company performance, subtly attributing it to Alexandra's lack of consistent oversight. He called for an independent audit and, as a temporary measure, proposed a vote of no confidence in Alexandra's leadership. He was poised, almost victorious, just as Clinton moved to call the vote. Henry, positioned discreetly in the back with a technician's access panel he knew how to exploit, activated an override. On the main presentation screen, Clinton's slides vanished, replaced by a live feed of the damning data Henry had recovered clear. Undeniable logs of Clinton's executive access codes, time-stamped and linked to the manipulated client portfolios. The room erupted in murmurs. Vivian, seated among the press, her eyes wide, began live-streaming the unfolding drama. Her phone pointed at the screen. Clinton's composure cracked. "This is a fabrication," he thundered, his voice echoing through the stunned auditorium. A desperate attempt to deflect attention from a failing CEO. But Astrid, Alexandra's lawyer, stepped forward, her voice calm but authoritative. "These logs are verifiable. Mr. Clinton, they have been authenticated by multiple independent forensics experts. Furthermore, we have a sworn affidavit from a whistleblower in your department detailing your full plan." As if on cue, a junior executive, Elias, who had discreetly aided Henry in his investigation, stood up in the front row, his face pale but firm. Alexandra, who had been sitting regally on stage, rose slowly. She walked to the microphone, her hand gently resting on her visibly rounded stomach. "What Mr. Clinton fails to mention," she said, her voice clear and strong, "is that I am pregnant, and this child, my child, will be the next generation of the Drake legacy." A gasp rippled through the room. "Mr. Clinton," she continued, her gaze unwavering, "tried to exploit this vulnerability, manipulating data and spreading rumors to seize control of the company I am building for my child's future. He underestimated not only my resolve but also the integrity of people like Henry Walker, who risked everything to expose his greed." Security, already alerted by Astrid, moved in. Clinton, his face contorted with rage, made a desperate lunge towards Alexandra. But Henry, always vigilant, was quicker. He stepped in front of Alexandra, deflecting Clinton's desperate attempt at a physical confrontation. Clinton was quickly subdued and led away by authorities. The media descended, a chaotic whirlwind of flashing cameras and shouted questions. The narrative had irrevocably shifted. In the ensuing weeks, Clinton was formally arrested and charged with corporate fraud and attempted hostile takeover. The false stories about Henry were retracted, replaced by Vivian's sensational exposé detailing his courage and ingenuity. Alexandra, with newfound clarity, embarked on a mission to redefine Drake Global Capital's legacy. She appointed Henry to a new high-level position, Director of Corporate Integrity, with a mandate to implement a system of unparalleled transparency and ethical oversight. Months later, Alexandra gave birth to a healthy baby. Henry was by her side, a quiet, reassuring presence, a non-traditional father to her child. He balanced his new, challenging role at Drake Global Capital with being a devoted dad to both Leo and the new baby, Alexandra. No longer the isolated CEO, embraced her new role as a mother and an ethical leader. She launched a mentorship program for single parents within the company, inspired by Henry's journey, fostering a culture of support and understanding. One sunny afternoon, Henry, Leo, Alexandra, and the baby were at a bustling Seattle park. Leo, fully recovered, laughed as he played with the baby, pushing a small toy stroller. Henry and Alexandra sat on a nearby bench, sharing a quiet, contented smile. Their relationship, once a cold transaction, had blossomed into a deep, unconventional partnership, built on respect, shared parenthood, and an unexpected, profound love. A small bronze plaque was later installed in Drake Global Capital's lobby, near the main entrance. It bore Alexandra's vision for the company's future, a commitment to ethical practice, integrity, and a fund for employees facing hardship. It was a legacy born not of power or wealth, but of desperation, a single father's unwavering integrity, and the courage to find humanity in the most unexpected places. It was a testament to the belief that some things money simply cannot buy, and some bonds are forged in the crucible of impossible choices.